why this trust was designed such that Denel, the sponsor company, which is a part of a defined benefit plan, had no access to this large surplus, which as at April 2022, it was as high as 1.472 billion rands, or a 465% funding level. There's no doubt there was abnormality in these numbers. But the way the trust was defined was that Denel, the sponsor company, did not have access to this kind of surplus. So the exercise to start unlocking this surplus took as long as 2 years because of the nature of the trust, which also required court processes. With the great support of the members of the Pensioners Forum and that of the shareholders in DPE and the members of that particular trust, we were able to get to this point today. Most important, it had to be a win-win for all involved. That is the pensioners, the members, and Denel. And to make sure we had a proper, fair, and equitable process, each of these parties had an actuary to interpret and protect them. NMG was the actuary for the fund. Willis Towers was the actuary for the members and the pensioners, and Deloitte was the actuary for Denel. And for those who have dealt with the benefit fund, it's quite complicated. There's a lot of reliance on the actuaries because the liabilities have to be properly actuarially valued. That's why everybody had to be protected by the actuaries. This was Denel's view of how this process will be properly done and everybody is safely protected because there are human beings in it. And so fast forward to 28 July, 992 million rands became that surplus, which could be transferred and attributed to Denel after this elaborate exercise. We are particularly grateful to the leaders of the Members Forum because it had to be that the members must be supportive of this process. We are grateful to the actuaries who carried us through this. We're grateful to the lawyers who had to balance all the parties, and the commitment of the Department of Public Enterprise to our process, however long it took. It's very important that I emphasize this, that this particular process was communicated to most, if not all, the stakeholders to say, we are doing this to unlock a certain amount of cash flow to deal with our liquidity crisis. This includes labor. I know behind me there's a solidarity fund. They had the full timetable in terms of what we think would be the scheduled time in which this surplus would flow into Denel. This was to make sure that nobody thinks that we're folding our arms and doing nothing about the problem that we had. Behind this, knowing, of course, the 992 million rands is not going to answer all of Denel's problems. the company itself needs to be restructured. And so the new restructuring plan, supported by us as the board and the shareholder, will create a self-sustaining business with a significant order pipeline. Part of that plan is a sale of non-core assets. And even that is communicated very well with key stakeholders. This will address the legacy debt which comes from many years ago and the introduction of liquidity into the company. This will immediately improve profitability, enable the company to retain and appoint able skills and leadership, some of which we lost in the process. I just want to thank again the Pensioners Forum, which was key for us to get to this point, and without which we would not have been able to get traction from our ideas. I have to thank the DMBT trustees. I have to thank the employees who contributed to the process to make sure the payment of the outstanding salaries is being made. I do want to thank employees for their support and commitment during the challenging period we faced. Once again, I think as the chairman of the board, I need to apologize profusely for the stress and the anxieties caused to the employees and their families. We do trust that this will contribute towards the fostering of a productive and normal relationship between Denel and its employees, given that our program and plan going forward, our biggest infrastructure as a company is the people themselves. I would finally just again want to thank our shareholder, DG. I want to thank you. The Department of Public Enterprises for their support and commitment throughout this journey, and a special word of thanks to our Minister, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. I think let me end it there, and if you do not mind, I then can ask, we have here our Chief Restructuring Officer. We also have our interim CEO, if they want to make any comments. And DG, you are free to do so as the department, if anything you want to add to this, after which then I have to field the questions. I just want to emphasize, today I am going to deal with the questions as the chairman of Denel. And where I am trapped, I'm going to ask for help, but direct all the questions to me, because today I just want to say, as this board, we're quite comfortable with, we're not here to make excuses, we're not here to defend anything, we're just here to say this board has quietly looked at what can possibly be done to deal with the harbor that Denel found itself in. We are the highest, or we're the last line of defense before we run to Pretoria, our shareholder, for help. Otherwise, they should not have a board. They should be sitting here. Hence, I'm going to take just about every question that comes from everywhere. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pam. Let me hand over to you. You will know best what to do with the flow. But thank you very much for indulging us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, I'm not sure if you want to comment now or should we leave the comments for later, the questions for the panel later? Because we just have one presentation by our CRO in terms of our new strategic approach. It's not a long one, and he can just unpack for you guys, and then we can go into questions. Mr. Riaz Salucci, by the way, sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chairperson of the Denel Board, Acting DG, esteemed members of the media, of course, our union colleagues here, and then the Denel Interim Acting CEO and the management. What I'm going to present to you here is a process that was started about 6 to 7 weeks ago, which essentially encapsulates the process and the interventions that we have undertaken in conjunction with what has already been said by the chairperson to start the road to recovery, to rejuvenate the organization and to stabilize it, and hopefully to create the conditions which will allow us to get to a position where Denel is again a sustainable organization and a center of defense industrial capabilities and excellence. And that is what I'm going to present to you today as to what we have been busy with in order to get this organization back to where we think it should be in terms of it being a strategic asset of the nation and the country itself. Do it when they'll tell you when to change. So, is it written? So this turnaround plan has been socialized and it has been shared with the very key strategic stakeholders of Denel, obviously with the board of Denel, with the management of Denel, with the shareholder, with Armscor, which is a critical partner in our process to rejuvenation, and of course our primary customer and the reason for our existence, the South African National Defence Force and the Department of Defence. And to a large extent, and a great extent I would say, that there has been a lot of alignment and support for this turnaround plan, and we are now in the process of institutionalizing it, embedding it and operationalizing it in terms of developing an implementation plan in conjunction with what we have now heard of by the board chairperson, that we've at least created the possibility now, with having addressed some of the legacy issues, of embarking on this new process. So I'm going to give you a very quick background and with the strategic relevance, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with the strategic relevance of Denel, but more specifically it is also about what the plan actually is and what the future end state of Denel should be looking like after we've gone through this process. So of course, I think you're all familiar with the fact that Denel is a key strategic industrial capability, which primary purpose is actually to serve the local defense force in order for the defense force to execute its constitutional mandate to safeguard the citizens of our country and to protect its territorial integrity. I think one of the critical issues really is that we all talk about what is the relevance of Denel. And the fact of the matter is that it is the custodian has been and will continue to be the custodian of strategic and sovereign capabilities of the National Defence Force. Not only is it the custodian, it has been the original equipment manufacturer and maintenance repair organization for numerous critical systems. And when we talk of critical systems, those systems which allow the Defence Force its combat capability. But as we're also all aware of, the fact of the matter is that over the last while, the South African defence budget has been declining quite significantly. And I think, you know, the normal norm in the world, even according to the United Nations, is around about 2% of GDP is what is normally acceptable in terms of defence spend. I think right now we're on somewhere about 0.7% in terms of defence spend as a percentage of GDP. This has had a direct effect on the Defence Force and its ability to rejuvenate itself with capital equipment and support on the support side, as well as having an adverse effect on Denel, because we have not been able to fund the necessary capabilities via the defence budget, which we historically used to do. Okay. So between about 2010, 2015, I mean, Denel was in a healthy situation. We were getting out of a very difficult financial and economic and commercial position. We were profitable. But after around 2016 onwards, it showed signs of real distress. And we had to take on additional debt, which had a huge burden, financial burden on liquidity. And our working capital could not be used to fund the growth that we had envisaged at that point. Suffice to say that Denel was in a very difficult situation, and that just continued until where we are at the moment. So you just bear with me. Of course, because of state capture and together with weaknesses in management, leadership, I mean, we all know what the effects of all of this. It had a fundamental impact on the liquidity crisis, and it had impacted on our ability to develop any kind of effective turnaround strategy. Okay. And then, of course, when COVID came, it was the absolute perfect storm, you know. And all of these combined totally to create a situation where revenue fell from a peak of about 8.2 billion rand in 2015-16 to where we are now, just around under 2 billion rand. I mean, and you can see the devastating effect that it had. That the revenue was going down significantly, but our footprint and the cost base of Denel remained the same. And we all know what was the effect of that in terms of our ability to meet our obligations, specifically also with regard to our people and their salaries. So it was imperative. I mean, we've reached the point where it is really critical that there was an intervention that government, this shareholder and the board took, that we had to stop this bleeding right now. We had to do something in order to make sure that we retain these strategic and sovereign capabilities. Okay. Now, in terms of the institutional mandate of Denel, it says very clearly it's a custodian of assigned strategic and sovereign capabilities. I mean, we all know that. You can find it in the Defence Review, you can find it in the white paper. But very practically, if you look at the role of the Defence Force, both internally and externally, internally we have our responsibility as the National Defence Force to support the civilian authorities during specific contingencies. If you saw what happened with the unrest last year, and you saw with the natural disasters that took place this year, the Defence Force played a significant role in assisting the law enforcement agencies, natural disaster management systems, local government, provincial government, and national government to help to address those issues that we were confronting the country. And in both instances, if you look at what happened throughout the country last year and then in KwaZulu-Natal with the floods, the Air Force and the Defence Force, and particularly the Air Force, played a significant role. Their helicopters that played that role in assisting the police and assisting government to deal with that crisis were the helicopters that were built and maintained and supported by Denel. Now you can imagine if the Defence Force is so reliant, specifically in this instance the Air Force, on those platforms, air platforms, if Denel is not in a position to support those particular platforms, those systems and capabilities, it has a complete negative effect on the operational availability of the Defence Force to assist the civilian authorities. Externally, in terms of our foreign policy, we've got two deployments at the moment. The one is in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and the other now is more recently in terms of our deployment to Mozambique in support of the government there in SADC. Again, in both those instances, and specifically in the DRC, the two combat platforms that played a significant role in assisting the United Nations to address the issues around the rebel groupings there were the Rooivalk helicopter and the Oryx helicopter, and the C-130. If Denel was not in a position, and is not in a position because of its inability to support that equipment and weapon systems, you can imagine the operational and combat effectiveness of the Defence Force declines significantly. So it is critical that we maintain these capabilities for the Defence Force. Similarly in Mozambique. So not outside of its institutional mandate, just from a very practical level, we've got to make sure that we have those capabilities funded in support of the Defence Force. So if we agree that we need to keep this organization because it is the custodian of strategic and sovereign capabilities, what do we need to do? Now, there are two typical and very critical issues that we need to understand, okay? It does support the foreign policy, but more particularly, it provides the country with national strategic independence, okay? And this is very critical, because if South Africa is one of the few countries in the world outside of the developed nations, okay, where we have a developed defense industrial capability. If we lose this industrial capabilities, which has been led by Denel for so long, okay, we will lose the strategic independence that it provides to government. You can imagine if we're relying on third parties for our defense equipment and capabilities. If that country or countries that are supplying South Africa decide for whatever reason, geopolitically and otherwise, to cut the supply of defense capabilities to South Africa, it leaves us without the ability to determine our own future from a defense and security perspective. And of course, Denel is a prime contractor at level 4, level 5 systems integrated. There are not many companies in the world and in locally that plays that role of integration. So you can understand the human capital that exists in this organization. And it contributes significantly to the export industry from almost 7 billion rand per annum, okay? So it is a vital element in the manufacturing and industrial and technological sector of our country, okay? Now we say, what is the business case? What underpins this turnaround strategy, okay? Right now, we've got a self-sustaining order book of about 12 billion rand, okay? Which is 6 times what the annual revenues at the moment, okay? The problem that we have at the moment is that we don't have the wherewithal, the liquidity, and the cash reserves. And there's been a huge brain drain in terms of skills leaving the organization to be able to execute that order book that is there, okay? There is also a potential, after an analysis, not only by ourselves, but by Armscor. We have identified a potential order book of about 30 billion rand that Denel can win and can execute over the next 3 to 5 years. And this is not a thumbsuck, okay? These figures actually come from actual requirements that have been discussed with Denel. We know that they are in individual countries' capability requirements, and they are funded. The problem is that we've not been able to close any of these deals because of credibility issues, reputational issues, inability to put up performance guarantees, bank guarantees, okay? And that is where we are moving towards. So there is a clear business case that underpins this turnaround strategy, okay? We still have the institutional knowledge, okay? There is huge amounts of interest right now. If you look at what's going on geopolitically within Europe at the moment, okay, between Ukraine and Russia, what's happening within the Far East in certain instances, and even in our own, the level of instability is pushing a surge in requirements for defense capabilities, okay? And that has a direct effect on the industry. And we are seeing it every week, every day almost. We're getting inquiries from different sources and countries as to whether we are in a position to supply equipment and systems into those environments. Obviously done responsibly within our governance processes and within the law. but we are not able to respond to those requirements and opportunities because of the situation we are here. And that is what we are busy with, to try and create the basis on which we can do that. Okay? As I've indicated, there's a significant appetite for partnerships in order to move this organization further. And of course, we've got battle-proven intellectual property, and that intellectual capital and human capital is still within the organization and within industry. Okay? And there is a strong supply chain in South Africa that can support this turnaround strategy. Okay? We also have a significant amount of opportunities outside of the defense and security sector, which we have not exploited in terms of the capabilities that we have, which is another element to this strategy as well. Okay? So what have we been saying? Simply put, and in its simplicity is probably where it is more, the efficacy of the strategy comes from. We know where we are in the situation, the dire situation. We know where we want to go, the to-be end state. We've done the external analysis, the internal analysis, and we've said we need a clear, articulated, communicated strategy in order to be able to win alignment and support for this process going forward, and we need the correct leadership in order to lead us to that environment. So what are we busy with right now? We're busy with stabilizing. I call it, we've got to stop the bleeding. Okay? And right now, as part of this DMBT intervention, we have, to a large extent, stopped the bleeding. Okay? We've got to sustain this business and execute what we've got, and we've got to go and unlock an order pipeline. We've got to unlock an order pipeline to grow, and we're not talking of a 3 to 5 year plan. Okay? We're talking of a 12 to 18 month plan here. And then there are no Chinese wall. It's not mutually exclusive. They all work in tandem. These phases, right now, what we are busy with at the moment. So what are we saying? Essentially, there are 6 elements that we're busy with. Okay, we need to reduce the cost and increase the revenue. Otherwise, we cannot sustain this business going forward. We've got to make sure we look after our people who are engaged, and that they're motivated, and that they see that there's some light at the end of the tunnel. We've got to unlock the revenue stream. We can do all of these other things, okay, but if we do not unlock the revenue stream, all of this will come to naught. We've got to make sure that we perform optimally, on time, on budget, and that we execute our programs according to our milestones and the expectations of the customers. And we cannot do it alone. We've got to do it with partners and in joint ventures. We're not talking about SEPs here. We're talking about partnerships that will give us access to market, new technologies, and funding mechanisms, okay? So what are we saying, okay? Right now we know we remain a loss-making business, okay? We have to make sure that we improve our liquidity, hopefully through government support and the recapitalization, the selling of non-core assets, more efficiencies. We've got to make this organization efficient. We've got a footprint that is too big for the level of revenue that we've got, okay? And the only way we can do this is to make it more affordable, unlock the pipeline. We've got to reduce the footprint. We've got to sell off some of the non-core assets to unlock some of the financial assets that are there. We've got to implement the shared services. We've got too much fat in the organization. We duplicate things all the time. And our IT systems and the ERP systems have been duplicated historically all over the business. So there is an intervention to clean up the business, make it lean, agile, to be able to respond to things in a much more effective way. Okay, so what are we doing? We're saying the 3 critical things is to stabilize, to sustain, and grow the business, okay? Effective stakeholder management is critical, okay? Because we have not paid enough attention to stakeholder management. We need alignment between the stakeholders, the customers, externally, internally. More importantly, between Armscor, the Department of Defense, and ourselves, so that we can see that all our interests converge to support these industrial capabilities. We've got to, obviously, unshackle ourselves from the legacy debt, because we cannot move. Those are statutory legal obligations that we've got to address. Okay? We've got to have cost reduction interventions, because without that we cannot survive and sustain this business. Okay? We've got to become more efficient. We've got to retain a skills base that allow a critical mass for us to fulfill our obligations from a contractual perspective. As I've indicated, the pipeline is critical. It is probably the most critical. And of course, smart partnerships and effective management and leadership to be able to take us through this process into the new environment. So what's the future state? All we're saying is it has to be, and we've proved that this can happen. We've got to make it sustainable, okay, in order to support the capabilities, the strategic capabilities that we provide. That's the reason for existence, to supply those capabilities to the Defence Force. All the other issues around in external international markets, and are interventions that support and fund these capabilities while we're going through a difficult time, internally and locally, in terms of the defense budget. We've, sorry. Right. So I pressed it. Just go to the last slide there, please. Carry on. Carry on. Carry on. There we go. Of course, we have to be profitable. We need revenue. Job creation is critical also in terms of helping the economy going forward. Efficiencies and productivity. We've been losing a lot of money historically in terms of unable to perform according to our contractual obligations. Okay, we've got to have broad buy-in for this vision and alignment. Okay, so what are the 4 key issues that we're addressing? It's our customers, suppliers, strategic partners. We cannot do this in isolation of strategic partners. And above all, we need to look after our people and rebuild the skills in the organization. Okay? And of course, we've got to make sure we communicate this and communicate it right through within the organization to the external and internal public. And we've got to align with our stakeholder. And of course, the shareholder in government is critical in the success of this. So, colleagues, I think that is in a nutshell. I've just given you a very high-level helicopter overview of what we have been busy with, what the restructuring process has been busy with over the last 6-7 weeks. And now we're about to enter into the implementation phase. And fortunately, with the work that the board and the management has done, with the support of the shareholder, is unlocking the DMPT at least has now laid a basis, a foundation upon which we can kickstart this process going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. William? William, any comments? Are you? You're fine. Okay. Okay. All right. Time for questions.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Riyadh. Thank you, William. We will now take questions. I will direct them where they should go. You want to comment on
Thanks, colleagues. I think we know we'll take 3 sets at a time or something and see how it goes. And also, if I can ask my colleagues on to help us with the questions coming through from Zoom, and then we can answer those from the journalists.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's Diabosita from SABC News. So I just want to confirm, of this 992 million, how much of it went to the salaries, the exact amount that went to the salaries of the workers? And what now happens to the process that Solidarity had undertaken of auctioning the assets of Denel? What happens to that process now? I did note that you said that you were working together with Solidarity. Thank you.
My name is Christelle Cornelissen. I'm a journalist from Marula Media. Ma'am, I would like to know what is the payment plan for pay-as-you-earn for employees and the pension fund backlog, and also what would be the impact of any restructuring at Denel on employees?
Sorry, I didn't hear you from where?
Marula Media.
Marula Media.
Yes.
If you don't mind, can you repeat your questions?
My question is, what would be the payment plan for pay-as-you-earn for workers at SARS?
Okay.
I believe that there's a backlog with the payment of tax.
Okay.
That is indeed correct. Also, any backlogs with pension fund payments
Okay.
regarding employees. And then I would like to know the impact of restructuring on employees going forward. What are they facing now?
Okay.
question from Linda Enso from Business Day.
Business day.
Yes. How much was needed to fully pay salaries and all pension obligations?
How much was it?
How much was needed to fully pay the salary
Okay,
and all the pension obligations?
okay.
Where did the money come from, and does Denel have the funds to continue to pay salaries in the months ahead?
Okay.
And then there's Carol Payton from the News. Mrs.
I didn't hear the
Oh, Business News.
who?
Business Day.
Still business day.
Mhm.
Okay.
And Mrs. Sirobe, would you mind very much repeating your opening remarks? Several journalists could not get into the meeting and missed them.
I must do what?
Repeat the opening remarks. Carol Payton is News 24, actually.
No, I'm not going to do that.
And then there's
No,
one
no, no.
question
Sorry. I'm happy to answer the questions.
The
I
last
will not
question-
hold people here for some 15 minutes kind of conversation to deal with others. There's time limits for everyone. I think people come from everyone. So we will send the
The state.
statement, but if people have questions on it, sorry, I needed, I'm 63 years old, I need to answer quickly. No, I won't do that.
Okay, last question from Carol. How much money do you need to clear the legacy debt and pay salaries and pay as you earn and provide working capital? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Right.
It's Ndayezo from Power FM. News.
Oh, FM, okay.
Just on the issue of restructuring and the impact that it may
Yeah.
have on employees,
Okay.
are unions fully engaged in this process? I believe there's some unions that are against any form of retrenchment of some sort. But if you would just give us clarity on
Okay.
those engagements.
Okay. Is another question? Should I answer this?
Chair, I think we must answer and then we can have another round.
Okay. So just that the answer of business day, I wasn't going it will be unfair on them. How much of the salaries collect me, William? It's about 320 million rands? Huh? 318 million rands went to salaries. And then there was a related question from Business Day, which was how much was needed to pay for salaries? It's 318 million rands. I hope you answered. Where did the money come from? I gave a long spiel of that. It came from the surplus which was sitting in the Denel Medical Benefit Trust after 2 years of that work. And then payment plan for pay as you earn, payment plan for pension fund, that was also in the statement. There is a payment plan for that. A plan is a plan, that's that whole thing. And then there's a question on Solidarity Union and the auctions. They are here, they can answer that. I think they are the ones who did the auctions. Luckily they are here to answer for that. The impact of restructuring on employees, the law is very clear on that. if there's going to be any impact on the employees for restructuring, whether it is talking retrenchment and all of that, there is a full process that's required by law. And that full process, if there is any need for it, it will be communicated accordingly. What I'm also trying to say is that we cannot announce a restructuring here and there are stakeholders all over the place that needs to be consulted in terms of restructuring. So we do not have that kind of answer on the retrenchment. You then have, and that was from Power FM. I hope you answered.
Yeah, I'm answered.
Okay. There's a legal process, there's labor law, there is consultation, there's all manner of things that comes with that. It will be improper for us to talk about what restructuring is going to do to employees in terms of retrenchment when actually we haven't had that conversation. So forgive me if I'm sounding quite evasive. I know what you're trying to do there. I'm old enough to know. I've heard those questions before. And Marula asked the same question about what that restructuring will do to employees. On the positive side, I want to say that restructuring is meant to do exactly what we're not answering today. Denel has got to be taken back to where it used to be. It is supposed to be a positive plan because we want Denel to go back to where it used to be. And Denel used to be this powerhouse of the intellectual capacity and the best of the breed in the defense industry. I will be surprised if that restructuring plan does not have a positive impact on the employees of Denel. The last bit, which is from Business Day, how much to clear the legacy debt. We've also spoken about the payment plan on the legacy debt. It comes from many years ago. And those payment plans are meant to deal with specifically that. Is there anyone who feels I have not answered the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, ma'am, but perhaps I misunderstood. Has all the money been paid? The pension fund, the pay as you earn, you say that it was answered. Has everyone received everything that is due to them? Maybe that can answer my question.
Okay, what is due to the individuals is the actual salary. Then next to them is the pay-as-you-earn, which is now SARS, and then is also the pension fund. What do you call it? Pension fund, retirement? Den rate. That is what goes to den rate. And so the plan to SARS and to den rate is very clear, to den rate and to SARS. But the salaries to the pension fund, to the employees' pockets, completely done. Then you have the payment plan with den rate and SARS for pay-as-you-earn. You still have a question to that?
Yeah, when? Or is that not?
Pardon? When the payment plan it's been agreed. Answer by the option. Thanks. And it has just my
Good afternoon, Mr. Derek Mann, for the pen. We have with the basically in regards to this, that we will once all monies have been salaries, you've just heard is about 318 million rand. Once that has been paid and proof that our members have been paid, we will lift the hold on the bank accounts as well as subscriptions. At this stage, we have no indication that no member has been paid. So we have lifted the hold as well as suspended the auction process. Thank you.
Thank you. I represent Defence Web, which is an online publication.
Defence Web.
Defence Web, yes. I just want to find out how far has the sale of non-core assets progressed, in particular things like Hensoldt. And on another issue, if I may, Lockheed Martin certified Denel as an MRO service center. Has that actually been terminated, or is that still ongoing as it has been in many years in the past?
Mike, is that your Lockheed? Okay. Thank you very much. The CEO of Aeronautics is here. It's quite sophisticated. But the sale of non-core assets, you mentioned Hensoldt. We've got all the approvals from the shareholder side and on our side, and it is quite imminent. In fact, part of our next part of making impact on the debt is based on this. We do finally to conclude the sales. So you will number of to deal with, but Hensoldt specifically that you mentioned is quite imminent. Mike, can you answer the Lockheed Martin?
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Mike Hobe. I'm the division of Martin. In the Lockheed Martin accreditation, we have had continuity of support from Lockheed Martin, and we've continued to be accredited to date. We renew it on an annual basis. We have been able to renew it again this year. It will run until I think February or March next year when we go through that process again.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. But for him, for Derek, let's just leave our COVID with him.
He did say that we are doing well. He did say we are doing well.
So,
Sibaki from Jacaranda. So, in terms of this 12 to 18 month plan, if I understood you correctly, would you say that this is the plan that's needed to sort of start the process in getting Denel to what it used to be post the restructuring as well? And in terms of the restructuring, could we possibly see, as in the case of Eskom, Denel possibly pulling up people with the most critical skills, asking them to get Denel on the right pathways again? And just one last question on the restructuring. Are you able to give maybe figures as to how many people may be affected?
no. That one, no. The last one, no. Because it's going back to the, I know how you are, guys. I've been here before. But Riaz, you must answer the first two questions.
Well, the 12 to 18 month plan, I mean, if we say it's underpinned by, as I've indicated, all the interventions that we are busy with at the moment in terms of non-revenue related are going to support the plan going forward. The criticism of this particular unlock that to within the next 3 to 6 months, at least contracting some of those revenue streams in order to have some cash flow and revenue coming through the business. If we don't do that, these interventions, the monies that we accrue from these interventions, the non-revenue interventions, will dry up. I mean, it's not, it can't go on indefinitely. So to run a commercial business, well, commercial in the sense that you need to sustain it through revenues is very critical. We know that we've lost a lot of critical skills. And yes, there are still a lot of those individuals who have left the organization. Some have gone overseas, some of them are still locally here. I said we're not an island on ourselves. We're going to have to work with industry to get those skills back, some of them. I mean, Denel is still an employee of choice. People have been saying often that if we're going to come back, so recruit well, through revenue says that there is a plan in order to ensure we maintain the to the strategy.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, it's Carol again from News 24. How much do you hope to raise from the sale of non-core assets? Do you plan to make a request to the fiscus for additional support? And how much will that be? And then she also needs a response on how much working capital do we need and where are we going to get it from?
So how much to raise from the sale?
From the sale of non-core assets.
And how much support from government?
Are we going to?
Yeah?
And the working capital that we need.
And the working capital. Okay.
It's Diabusi again. Mr.
SABC?
Yes. Mr. Follow up from weeks. When you did, you mentioned that state support, or the money from the fiscus had gone down. Have you been in talks with maybe the shareholder as well as maybe National Treasury? What is the way forward if government is not able to help them now going forward? Because you did say that the money has not been coming through. What is the status quo currently?
Okay, so I will answer that question. Yeah. Let me start with the last question. I hope News 24 doesn't say we prioritize SABC. It's just that it's the one that I must remember first. Are we having talks to the shareholder? Absolutely. Remember now that just about everything we're doing, whether it's a sale of non-core or even the restructuring of this GMBT, including the way forward, we have to stay close to the shareholder in terms of the requirements and so on. That is why the DG is sitting with us. Even though she is saying nothing to you, we should not misrepresent them. But Denel, I want to call it intimate relationship. It sounds like a boyfriend, girlfriend kind of thing. But Denel has we have a very close, when you're in trouble, you have to quite close to your shareholder. And secondly, but as the board, you have to do what you have to do internally and make it work. And so the shareholder is a last resort. That is our attitude as the board. And so the whole thing of recapitalization and shareholder support, whatever the word that is used, as far as this board is concerned, is a last resort. Having said that, it does not mean you are not talking to the shareholder in terms of, here we are, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and how can you support us? Where do you take us to? We're doing our best as a board, and we're doing our best as a management, and the employees must do what they are doing their best as employees, because everybody must take ownership of this. The board is hardly 3 years old here, And some of the issues we have come 8 years ago. And so even the shareholder is going to look at who's doing what to the problem and how far, and there's a good faith issue. And I just want to confirm that the board is working very, very closely with the shareholder in terms of solving the issues of Denel. We're not folding our hands and waiting for recapitalization, if that is a word you're asking for. Like any other shareholder, the board needs to say, we have gone up to here. Can you help us going forward in terms of whatever? And hopefully, the management and employees will do the same to the board to say, we've gone up to here. Can you, board, help us? And the board also then says, we've gone up to here. Can you, shareholder, help us with this? So I'm not answering your question directly. You want to know how much we're asking the shareholder? I know what you are trying to ask, but the point here is that the relationship with a shareholder in a state that we're in as a company has got to be very close, and it has got to have a lot of good faith in it, in terms of who's doing what to who, and make sure that we're not just idly asking for help when in fact ourselves, we are not helping ourselves. That's why we're excited about today, because the money we're talking about today comes internally. And we are able to talk to a shareholder with dignity to say, we're doing our best, and this is how far we have gone. So it's in a long-winded way. Yes, we're talking to the shareholder about the steps that we have to follow. The shareholder is going to look at our restructuring plan. Can they trust it? Is full of good faith? Are our employees with us behind it? Are the unions behind the restructuring plan? Make it work. They have to support a restructuring plan that we ourselves believe in, and they have to trust, because it must be backed by numbers, by possibilities, and not an idle kind of thing. If there's a reputation that SOEs do not spend a lot of time in terms of backing their restructuring plan with the reality. In our case, it's a different case. How much we're hoping to raise from the sale, how much from government? The one about how much from government, I will say I've answered that question. It has no number, except to say the government knows exactly where we are with the plan and how far we're going. How much of the working plan, of the working capital, we can talk about the working capital from this particular program of DMBT. I will not talk about the working capital beyond that. And Tandika is here, is the CFO. You can give the numbers and how much we need to raise from sale. Maybe then, again, William and Tandika, they are here. And let me rather hand over to them. But is there anyone who has not answered by me until Tandika and William come into it? No? Let me ask them.
Good afternoon, members of the media. My name is William Kakwale, the acting chief executive. So, Chair, with regards to the numbers, we're hoping to raise 2.1 billion out of the strategic assets. Currently, we have raised 920 out of DMBT. So the delta is still what we would still need to raise in terms of the strategic assets. And those are areas including the household is part of that portfolio. Chair, in terms of the working capital, we have allocated 190 million out of DMBT to invest back into the business as part of the working capital. That will be able to take us over the lip in terms of the business operating towards the future.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Are you answered?
Those numbers again.
189 million rands from this 992 million rands is what is going to working capital.
on a different.
And on the raising, how much from the sale, including the MBT, we had 2.1 billion rands, so we are hoping for 1.2 billion rands if all goes according to. Did I see another?
Another question?
Yeah, no, related to this? A different one, okay. Thanks, Pam.
I think we can go for the last round of questions.
We're quite comfortable. I'm comfortable.
Colleagues, I think this should be. I think there's one question at the bottom there we can take, and then I think we can be prepared to close the engagement.
Yeah, for the whole day.
You're enjoying
There's a
it.
question from News 24 again, from Carol. The Defence Force used to procure a lot of basic things from Denel, which gave Denel liquidity. Have you restored this relationship?
I'll ask William and then ask Reyes to answer the question.
Yes, we have restored the relationship with the SANDF, as you know, and I think Rias has alluded to the fact that we're working closely with AMSCO in resuscitating that relationship. So in fact, we have our weekly steercom meetings wherein we sit as executives on resolving some of the issues of the past, between the two entities. So the relationship is quite good; it's going in the right direction. Thanks.
Yes, who wants to?
May I? May I ask a question in relation to this? What is the situation with ADATA and the Reef Oyster project?
Let me answer the question.
You answer it, I'll take. Carry on, Chair.
I want to stop the question because it's a particular program. But if Reyes and William, you wanted to, because these are we're a defense company still. But if you want to deal with it, let me. But don't ask about our weapons and things. Okay, I've sorted.
Yes. So in short, we are working together to resolve some of the pertinent issues on those particular programs. Thank you.
You're fine. I'll kill you next time. All right. News 24, were you answered in your this restoring of the relationship? Yes. Sorry, I didn't get the name. Were you sorted?
Yes.
I was talking on behalf of Carol Payton from News 24.
Aye, Carol should be here now. Carol should be here now. Tell her to be here.
She says yes, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Pam. Akile.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've come to the end of the proceedings.
Any questions at the back? We haven't looked.
It's our four colleagues from Solidarity.
Okay, we're sorted.
Thank you very much for taking time to come out. I think we've had it's one of the first steps into rebuilding the reputation of Denel, and we do promise to have a lot more of these engagements so that we meet each other halfway and we are open and transparent about the organization. Thank you.
Let me just close. Let me close because we made the invitations and we are thankful for your presence. And secondly, the board only wants to talk to you when we have something to say. Generally, we do not have something to say because we are in the mud. We're trying to get ourselves out of the mud. I think maybe at this point, we're quite positive about where we're going, and we have no defense for all the problems before. Just want again to repeat that the employees' anxiety was also our own anxiety. We could not have been proud about that. And however that apology looks like, we will continue doing that and make sure that at least they understand that we're just as anxious as they were in terms of how this hiatus for the last 2 years looked like. We could not have slept well in terms of this lack of response to the salaries and stuff like that. But we are going to spend a lot of time with them in terms of taking Denel going forward and making sure that we are never in this position again. And at the same time, we're going to spend a lot of time with the shareholder in terms of how to take Denel forward. There are just any part of the shareholder, if you listen, whether it's a portfolio committee or it's defense or it's public enterprise, they all say Denel is a critical element of South Africa. And so this board has got to listen quite carefully to that and make sure that it is seen in such a manner and that it's not a simple case of selling fat cakes. It does have a lot of impact in the country in terms of, and also the industry itself. We're very mindful of that. And so when we don't say anything to you, you mustn't think that the board is on a holiday, and the board is actually digging deep into what next do we do going forward. And so we really appreciate your being here, and we appreciate Labour being here because we do talk a lot to them, and we do share details of where we're going with each program. And we want to just thank them also, in spite of who asked about the auctions, in spite of the auctions that Derek now doesn't know how much they raised from this auction. But we do thank them for, they're always there to actually engage us as a management and as a board in whatever form in terms of going forward. Because every stakeholder in the country says Denel is important until they say it's not important. But if everybody says Denel is very critical to this country, we have to take cue from that. And this board is either here to implement that, or this board must say, thank you, shareholder, can you see to finish? Because we are not in a position to take it forward. So our excitement and our positiveness about at least this big hurdle of paying the outstanding salaries has been the biggest issue for us, because our human beings, our families involved, there's all manner of things that we had to deal with. And so even though the program of getting into the MPT was never about salaries, when we started 2 years ago, it was about working capital and operational money for the group. And then we get caught up into this whole issue of salaries. But we're happy that it was there in time to deal with that. And hopefully, with a little bit of that we have for working capital, we're able to trigger the new Denel that we're looking at. And together with the shareholder, we will be able to talk about what else that we do, plus the sale of the non-core assets. We make sure that we were able to take Denel forward. I think in a long-winded way, Pam, I'm trying to thank you and your partners for being here today, because we don't take it for granted. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Well done. You should be doing this more often.
Take your old iPad. Look, it's broken.
Give it to the kids.